Hi, you're listening to The Sociology Show, a podcast about absolutely anything to do with the wonderful world of sociology. Whether you're a teacher, a lecturer, a student, or just taking a passing interest, this podcast will look at a range of issues from social class, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, religion, crime, education, and anything else that sociology has to offer. My name is Matthew Wilkin, and each episode I will speak to someone working in the field of sociology and let them explain all about their own interests, their research, and their experiences. So, put your earphones in, turn the volume up, and let's be sociology geeks together, eh? Hello and welcome to The Sociology Show. The Sociology Show podcast is brought to you in association with Tutor2You Sociology, the exam performance specialist for A-level and GCSE sociology students and teachers. And so you can visit the website, which is tutor2you.net/sociology. And there you can pick up revision guides, flashcards, revision videos, and everything else that you need for your A-level or GCSE sociology studies. And so the focus of this episode is learning the subject of sociology as an adult. And I'm delighted to welcome Sarah McLaughlin to the show. Sarah, thank you for joining me.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So I always ask people to start by telling us a little bit about who they are and what they do. So if you don't mind, Sarah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I'm a lecturer in sociology for A-level and access to higher education courses. And I'm also a doctoral researcher with Bristol University.
Thank you. When did you first encounter the subject of sociology, Sarah?
Quite young actually. Around age 14, my mum took an access to higher education course herself, and part of that course involved studying sociology for her for the first time. And she loved it so much, she then went to university and took a degree in social work and sociology. So as a teenager, our dining room table was full of piles of books, and I used to sit there flicking through her sociology books and started to really enjoy reading some of the ethnographic studies. I remember one in particular was Anna Pollitt's Girls' Wives, Factory Lives. And that was a study where Anna went to work with women working in a tobacco factory in Bristol during the time of union unrest, and I found it fascinating. So when my mum brought books back from the university library, I was straight in there having a read, and then she used to explain some key concepts to me. So I started learning about social class and gender and ethnicity and structure versus agency at quite a young age. And then sort of when I was taking my GCSEs, sociology wasn't a subject offered at my school. But I remember sat there at school thinking, I'm in a uniform and I'm sat on a line and the bell's ringing. And actually, some of this stuff that these sociologists are saying about being conditioned and things like that I'm really seeing it now. So I obviously started seeing things through a sociological lens at quite a young age. So naturally, I chose A-level sociology when I was then sort of 16 to 18. Really enjoyed that, looking at education and crime and deviance and religion. I remember in particular reading Eileen Barker's research into the Moonies, and thought it was amazing that these researchers could go and sort of live with these groups of people to really understand the everyday lives of these different groups. I became really fascinated by people and society, and really a micro approach to research. Now, my natural step at that point would have been to go to university and study A-levels, but unfortunately for me, the university fees came in that year. We didn't really understand it, and I did sort of think, what would I do with a sociology degree? I felt the sort of pressure to have a sort of guaranteed job and a wage after it, and unfortunately, big mistake, I ended up going to work and worked in finance for a number of years and had my own children. I had a child, and then it wasn't until I was in my 20s that kind of hankering after that university education was still in the back of my mind. And I still thought, what would I do with sociology? Maybe I should do something a bit more practical. So I went to do a business and human resource management degree, but found I just loved the human side. So things like human resource management and equality and diversity and social justice and all those kind of subjects. And that, of course, led me to then pursue a master's degree in sociology. And then from that, I thought, well, what am I going to do with that? Well, the only thing to do, if I love sociology so much, was to actually teach it. So I became a teacher in sociology after that time at university.
Wow, it's quite an interesting journey you took there. So you teach A-level sociology, but you also teach mature students on the Access course, is that right?
Yes, I do. I love teaching A-level students, the teenagers. I love the syllabus that we cover for sociology. But I think because I was a mature student and I really got so much out of being in education, especially as a mum, and my son coming to my graduation, and what that all meant. I had a real passion for helping other mature students like me come back into education. So when the job role came up as lecturer on an Access course, and I told my mum about it, she was like, yes, go for it, and it's where I fit really well. I absolutely love teaching adults and introducing them to sociology.
That's great. And for those that don't know, everyone knows a lot about A-levels, I'm sure, and GCSE. What is an Access course for those who've perhaps never heard of it before?
Yeah, good question actually, because people often assume A levels is the only route or BTEC's the only route. But for post 18, if you've left school without qualifications at level 3, or maybe you've taken a few years out, or life's taken a different route, and you suddenly decided actually I do want to go to uni, then Access courses are designed for mature students. They've been around since the sort of mid-70s actually, and they're part of the sort of government's widening participation agenda to help untraditional students get into university. So mature students fall into that category. And before the sort of 1970s, universities were dominated by male, middle class, white, sort of 18-year-olds entering via A levels. That was the kind of majority intake. But that's changing, or it has absolutely changed. We have people from different social classes, obviously males and females now, and coming from different routes into university. And an Access course is just that. It's mostly intended for adults who didn't get that level 3 for whatever reason. And the Access courses are offered in colleges throughout the UK. Usually they are a 1-year mode of study, and they have a range of pathways depending on the types of courses that adults hope to go into. So things like social sciences or business or health and social care or medical sciences. And some students do take their GCSE maths and English alongside the Access course as well. And that at the end of the course, the aim is they then have enough qualifications to get them on their way to university.
And I'm guessing you get a real mixture, don't you? Young mums and people in much older as well, should I say?
Yes, and that's the real kind of quality of the Access course. You get all sorts of people from all walks of life, all with different experiences, and that's what makes it so interesting. And the kind of when the students come on board the Access course during the year, they make friends with so many different people with different experiences, and it really enriches their experience. The sort of average Access student, if there was a typical Access student, would be female. It's more female dominated for various reasons. In their sort of 30s and 40s, maybe they've had children, maybe they've done some numerous jobs, but they now want to be qualified, or they now want to pursue their course further.
Right, thank you. And one of the questions I'm sure people would really want to know is about the success of an Access course. I mean, people are well aware of A-levels, as we already mentioned, but what sort of success rate do Access courses have?
Well, good question. Success in 2 different ways, actually. They are absolutely successful in terms of the numbers of students who pass and progress to university. So, for example, last year there was around 23,000 students registered on an Access course and progressing up to university. About 74% are female, so they are more female dominated. So in terms of statistics, yes, absolutely. But also in terms of fulfillment, I think as well, qualitative kind of feedback from students has always been how the course has helped them make friends, has helped them grow in confidence, has really opened their eyes to new topics. They really value the support and enthusiasm of their teachers, and they feel very prepared for university. We often get students sending us emails, your year 2, 3 years down the line, saying, remember me, I was on your course how many years ago, and I want to let you know how I'm doing, which is such a lovely email to receive. And they very often say that, you know, when they went to university, they realised how much the Access course prepared them, their topic knowledges, their study skills, their ability to work and research online. So in various ways, the Access courses are really successful, and they're becoming more and more popular.
And in terms of the grading, it's like a merit distinction, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's modular, and each module is worth so many credits. So each module you'll get so many credits in regards to pass, merits and distinctions. And then the university, when they look at entry requirements, a little bit like in A levels when they might say, you know, you need, for example, 3 Bs or 2 Bs and a C to get in. When you look at degree information on the university websites, they will tell you what they would like from an Access course. So they might say so many credits as a merit or a distinction or whatever, depending on the university. So as the students progress, they can kind of see whether they're on track or not. And if they're not on track, we can look at what are the areas that you need to work on. So things like, you know, is it your topic knowledge, or do you need to read more, or is it more about your evaluation skills? So the course kind of does progress as the students go along, and as I said before, it's you know, very successful. It's a nice approach to learning for the mature students.
And before I ask you about actually teaching on the Access, as someone that went into education a little bit later yourself, what do you think are the main challenges for adults? Do they tend to be slightly more anxious than an 18-year-old, for example, going into study?
Yeah, it's surprising actually, because you know, you would think that teenagers are more anxious than adults, but absolutely not. I mean, day one in September, very often the students sort of appear in the classroom, and their last memory of being in a classroom is often quite negative.
Yes,
you know, maybe they were bullied at school, maybe they had nasty teachers. You know, some adults were in school in the era where a teacher could, you know, hit you with a ruler or whatever.
Yeah.
So they often come in thinking that teachers are a bit scary, or they're going to get told off, or they're not intelligent enough, or whatever it is. So definitely lots of anxieties. And also other barriers are things like time. Most adults have work, or they're caring for parents or children. So juggling their time is a real big thing as well. So students do become quite resilient during the year and learn how to manage their time. I think confidence as well, confidence that they can do this. And I often say to my students when they get their first, you know, assignment work back, it's not necessarily about the grade, it's about the feedback to help you move forward. If a student gets a pass or a resubmission of the first assignment, it's all about, you know, taking on board what it is you need to do differently and then progressing. And that usually works really well. So students then grow in knowledge, grow in skills and study skills, and then grow in confidence. But for some students, it's also very much a sense of their social class position. Yes. People like me don't go to university, you know, very often they're the first person in their family to even want to go to university. So they have no idea, you know, how you apply or what it means to be at university. What does it feel like going into a university? So we have to give them a lot of information about universities, and, you know, how it works with the funding, and a lot of kind of motivation and a lot of pastoral care to say, you know, why can't you go to uni? If you're on an Access course, then you've obviously got the determination. And if you pass your course, then you're qualified to go. So, you know, why can't you go? But we very often, you know, they will sort of say, you know, they have this idea that university is this place for other people. Yes. Who maybe are of a higher class standing than them. But, you know, I repeat myself time and time again, if I can do it, then you can do it. We need to break down those social class assumptions when it comes to higher education.
Yeah, I did ask that for a particular reason, because I've taught some adults myself, and I have found that before, that in terms of confidence, perhaps they didn't enjoy school themselves, or they weren't particularly successful at school. So it's trying to build up that confidence about being a learner again as a mature student, isn't it?
Definitely. Confidence is a really big thing. And I have to say to students sometimes, because they'll say, oh, you know so much about your topics and you're so intelligent. And I'll say, I'm no more intelligent than you. We're exactly the same. We're both intelligent because we want to learn. It's just that I've been doing this a few years longer than you have, and once you go to university, somebody will say to you, oh, I wish I was as intelligent as you. And you'll probably say the same thing. So it's not about necessarily intelligence. It's about, confidence and wanting to learn and having the enthusiasm, and also the support and encouragement of their friends and family around them as well. That's really important.
Yeah, agreed. So, Sarah, the other side of the classroom, how does teaching sociology at Access, how does it differ compared to teaching something like A-level sociology?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because first of all, when I first started teaching A-levels, I did worry that I wouldn't be kind of down with the teenagers, or would they all be naughty, and how would I control the class? But it's not like that at all. I find my A-level students are just lovely. They're always very sort of willing to learn. They find sociology really eye-opening as well. I would say that A-level students, because they've come from senior school and they've been in school all their lives so far, then they are ready to learn. They've already worked out, how to study, how to take notes, the sort of amount of time they might need to write an essay and do some homework. And very often their lives are a little bit easier because they won't be working as many hours. They won't necessarily have a family to look after. So they do have more time, and they're certainly very IT savvy, much more than I am. So I often get them to help me work out different websites or whatever. But in comparison, I would say mature students need a little bit more support with study skills. If you give them, a student a chapter in a book and say, take notes, well, how do you take notes if you've never taken notes from an academic book before? And some students have been doing jobs where they're not using a computer, so they might not be as IT literate, so they might need to learn some IT skills as well. So a little bit more study skills and sort of researching skills are something that the mature students might need a bit more support with. I would also say the mature students, it's hard. You can't tell a mature student off because kind of they're either the same age or a little bit older than you. And sometimes classroom etiquette has to be sort of set out at the beginning. So obviously put your mobile phone on silent and things like that. And you don't have to call me Miss, I'm just Sarah. But I think the biggest difference is probably, as we said before, that sort of self-esteem as well. Very often young people have family around them sort of praising them and giving them advice on what to do and what course to do and which university to go to. But for mature students, very often they are the first person within their friends or family to sort of come to education as a mature student. So they do need a lot more encouragement and support in some ways, and also a lot more understanding as well. So for example, if a mature student is late, I wouldn't think it was because they were just lazy and didn't want to get out of bed. It could be that they've dropped off two children at two different schools and then sort of, had to catch the bus, and they've got a lot to do in the morning before they get into college. So if they do arrive late in the classroom, it's always great to see you, not a, why are you late, or detention or whatever.
You're in detention, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would say one of the big similarities between my teenagers and my mature students is the love of stickers. So I get sociology star stickers printed out, and as a sticker for whatever reason, it can be all sorts of reasons, but both adults and teenagers love stickers, and so do I.
Agreed. I'd like stickers for good teaching. I'd be happy with that. Why not? Thank you, Sarah. That's going to be the end of part one. In part two, we'll talk more about learning the subject of sociology as an adult.
Great, thank you.
The Sociology Show podcast relies on the kind contributions of sponsorship and donations. If you enjoy the show, then you can help with the hosting costs by donating as little as £5 on the GoFundMe page. Simply visit uk.gofundme.com and search for The Sociology Show. If you can donate, then you will be sent a Sociology Show pen as a small thank you for your continued support of the show.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of this Sociology show. I'm talking to Sarah McLaughlin. We're talking about learning the subject of sociology as an adult on an access course. So, Sarah, if there are people listening who are thinking about it, maybe they're contemplating it, what sort of value does sociology have for mature students, would you say?
Oh, value. Okay. So I would say that as a mature student, if you're learning about society and learning to look at society differently and through a different lens for the first time, that can be really interesting. I mean, we've obviously all grown up in society, but it takes learning sociology to start looking at everyday life just differently. So sociology can help people reflect upon their lives through different perspectives. So for example, my mature students always say how much they enjoy the crime and deviance module, and learning to see how deviance means deviating from the norm, but sometimes questioning who decides what these norms are in the first place. Why do we do the things that we do in society? Those sorts of things that we've done because we've always done them. Well, who put that into place in the first place? So when we look at things like inequalities and how deprivation can lead to crime, or how substance misuse can be a reaction to the strain in society, or when some mature students themselves might question things that they've done in the past. Some of them have been in prison, some of them have gone through rehabilitation, and then when they look back through a sociological lens, they can certainly see that maybe this wasn't all about them. Maybe there were factors in society such as not having a great time in education, or family breakdowns, or the influence of the media, or maybe they were sort of being pulled into part of a subculture. When they start learning about that and then really reflecting upon what's happened in their lives, this can be a really liberating experience for them. So, for example, recently I've been bringing in lots of Black history into my curriculum planning, and Black Lives Matters has been a really topical issue in the last year. And many of my mature students who have sort of maybe grown up in the UK and gone to school in the UK have never learned about Black history, and they can be really surprised about how much we just haven't been taught in school. So, for example, a few weeks ago, we were exploring deviance, and we spent a lesson comparing different protests and the influence of the police and the media upon the way that these are reported and recorded. And even the words we use, is it a protest, or is it a demonstration, or is it a riot? And why different mediums choose those different words, and the sort of bias and meanings that they have in them. That can be, something that students say, wow, I didn't think about it in that way before. We were looking at the Brixton, Notting Hill kind of demonstrations and the recent Black Lives Matter demonstrations, and really pulling that apart. And some of the students said that, they'd heard of these events, but they didn't really understand the background to them and why people were so passionate about these events. We have a range of different, genders and ethnic groups in our cohorts, and what we find is it's really valuable for different, people from different ethnic backgrounds sharing their own experiences of racism and prejudices. And other students can really learn from that. When there's someone in your class sharing their experience of racism, there's no better way of learning about, Black Lives Matters, or the kind of background to those sorts of demonstrations, than having someone in your class talking about that. So that can be really, really helpful and a really enriching experience for mature students. Another kind of factors as well are ideas such as the way that the media influences our ideas, and how politics relates to media and social class, and how structures can lead to disadvantages, maybe how the UK education system isn't as fair as we're led to believe. And that again, leads to mature students reflecting on their own life journeys, and then seeing their life histories in a little bit of a different way. So maybe, for example, their time, if they've been in prison or they've been in trouble with the law, maybe that was a result of being led into negative company at school, or maybe we know the links between poverty and crime and lack of school support, and that can be a really emotional journey for adults, but a really empowering one. And it helps them to sometimes see, actually, maybe I'm not a bad person, maybe I didn't fail at school, maybe these structures just didn't work for me, and maybe school failed me. So that kind of reflection upon their histories is a really worthwhile, really valuable, and can be a really emotional time for our students as well. And if I got paid a penny every time one of my mature students said to me, why wasn't I taught this at school? Why didn't we have sociology at school? Then I probably would be retired by now. But, you know, just even things like the media and how the voting system works, and what does education policy mean, and what should you look out for when it comes to elections, rather than just seeing the news headlines. So all those kind of concepts that we all explore in sociology, I think has you know, just as much, even more meaning to mature students who are sort of returning back into education as a, you know, a little bit older than maybe the sort of 16, 17-year-olds might do.
Yeah, I think that's really important, actually, because, you know, so for a lot of the ideas for A-level students is conceptual, if you're talking about the unfairness of work or parenting or whatever it may be. But here you have people in the classroom that have experienced it, real life experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's surprising sometimes how many students might email me afterwards and say, we were talking about this and I just want to let you know, I was involved in this, or this happened to me, but now I can see this, or I can see what this particular theorist is saying. And that to me is really enriching, because I can see that they're really taking on board and learning, but also applying their learning and thinking about it outside the classroom. So that for me is one of the indicators of learning. You know, when has a student learnt? It's not just about their grades, it's about the way they use their learning outside the classroom and in their everyday life as well.
That's great. That's great. And is there any particular kind of studies or books or films which adult students really enjoy, or you recommend that they look at?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, where do you start with sociology? Everything is really relevant, isn't it? I put together and I update every September a kind of fact sheet about sociology for my students. And I include in there lots of books and films and podcasts and documentaries to help them to kind of learn around the subjects. It's not just reading books, it's also watching films and listening to podcasts as well. Some of my sort of favourites and some of the ones that the students particularly enjoy, for example, are The Tea Room Trade by Loud Humphreys, which is the American research, which was very unethical, but because it was so unethical, it was such an interesting read. But that was the research whereby the researcher sort of challenged the prejudices around homosexuality in America at that time, and kind of did observations in public toilets, and then went and found the people's information, or their demographic information, by using their car registration numbers and then going to their homes. So that's a really interesting one, and especially because it was set out to challenge the kind of perception of homosexuality at the time. And on the same sort of theme, I always show my students the film Pride, which is about the lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans community in London in the 80s, who supported the miners in Wales. Both groups had a common sort of value in that they were both being vilified by the media and by the sort of Margaret Thatcher's reign. We love watching that one. It brings a tear to everyone's eye. But I think poignantly at the end of that film, I always say to them that, when I was doing my A-levels, when I was 17, if my teacher had shown me that film, that would have been seen as promoting homosexuality and they could have been sacked.
Yes.
And that really brings home how recent laws have been that really discriminate against the LGBT community. I think my all-time favourite is probably Willie Russell's play Educating Rita. And that's about a working class, mature woman who goes to university and finds a love of education. And there's a real kind of key message about social class. She thinks that university is not for people like her, but she grows to love education and pursues that. And that play rings true for so many of the people on my Access course, that's just like them, coming to college and hoping to go to university as a mature student. The other ones that I like, obviously, is the podcast, the Sociology podcast. That's really important. And also more recent books are Chavs, The Demonisation of the Working Class by Owen Jones. Again, he sort of recognises how the media can demonise people, those who maybe have to claim benefits to survive or in low paid jobs. And of course, many of my students are in low paid jobs and claim benefits to sort of survive. So that book really helps them to recognise how powerful the media has been in regards to people's perceptions and unfair perceptions of people, and it also helps challenge their views as well. And I'd say my final one in my list of favourites is Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. And I think if you don't understand what white privilege means, then that book is the book for you. And a lot of my students, after reading that, say, I thought I got it, but now I really do. And also, as well, that book really brings about how much Black history we don't hear about. For example, in class the other day, we were talking about the Bristol bus boycott. That was a really big big event, a big protest that happened in Bristol, just down the road from us. But most people in the class had never heard of it. So again, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race is again a real eye-opener for my mature students. And what I find as well is that after reading a few books and podcasts and documentaries, my students then often always send me links to stuff they found, and then I add that to my list of reading and the list goes on and on. But loads of books and films and documentaries have those themes that we cover in sociology.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I remember I read that book myself on Brighton Beach last summer. I remember looking around and there's about 3 or 4 other people reading it on the beach at the same time. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we had the Black Lives Matter movement around that sort of time, June, July last year, which it probably pushed it to number 1 in the charts or something. But it was really pleasing to look around and see how many people were reading it, actually.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Yeah,
it's one of my favourites from the last 12 months, actually.
definitely. And so tell us about your own teaching experience and passion for sociology. It's kind of led you to your own research, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know whether you can tell, but I do get very excited about sociology.
We all do. That's why we're here.
Absolutely. Who doesn't? As I said, I've been teaching for access students for over 7 years now. And, I sort of noticed really how much the pastoral support is really important to their progression. So not just having good teachers with interesting lessons and getting the work done and getting your marks, actually the pastoral support and care for the students is really important. Returning to education as a mature student can be a really reflexive process, and individuals can start to think more critically about and feel that they're starting to change as a person. Their eyes are opened to ideas that they've never thought about before. They kind of grow and change during the year. And I'm really interested in social mobility, and as an access course, leads to sort of transformation almost in identity and changing of careers and building of confidences, then that kind of promotes social mobility as well. So I felt that was something that really needed researching. Lots of researchers have looked into social class and education. A couple of your interviewees on the podcast before, such as Diane Ray, Nicola Ingram, they've looked into social class and education. A lot of research has been done on senior schools and primary schools and higher education. But nothing really on access to higher education course. So my mature students are kind of missed really in the research. So I felt that this is something that I really need to kind of formally research and get that out there so that people can understand how social mobility can change, how access courses can widen participation, but more specifically, how an access course can change somebody individually, how it raises their aspirations and changes them. So I've embarked upon a doctorate in education with the University of Bristol. I'm in my 3rd year and I'm at my research stage. So the aim of my study is to explore the experiences of women returning to education as mature students and how they embark upon an access course with the aim of progressing to university. And I really hope the outcome of my research helps to inform practice for teachers, course leaders, and also welfare support staff in sort of colleges or institutions that offer these access courses.
And of course, once you've got your findings, Sarah, you'll come back on the show and tell us all about it. Is that right?
I would love to. Yes, please. I absolutely love your show. So it'd be lovely to come back and share my findings with everybody next year.
That's great. That's great. Any last advice, Sarah? There may be some people listening who are thinking about doing the access course. Any other last advice in terms of how they go about it, what to research?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe think about what it is you hope to explore at university, but don't necessarily think you have to have a fixed idea, because often when you come back into education and you start learning new subjects, you might sort of find a subject that you didn't realize you loved before. Yes. So you might change your mind. But do have a look at university websites, look at courses that you might be interested in, and look at entry requirements. And then if you do need a level 3, then an access course would be, if it suits you, then most colleges offer access courses. So have a look at your local college and, have a chat. See if you can maybe speak to some of the teachers that teach on the access course for advice on the right pathway and what would suit your route into university. I think my biggest advice is to take each step as you come to it. It sounds like a really big mammoth task, taking on a 1-year access course and a 3-year degree. It's 4 big years. It's lots of work. That seems unmanageable. But just put your application in first, and then get to day 1, and then get to your first week, and then work towards your first assignment, and you'll be surprised how quick the year goes. And we can think of many barriers that might stop us doing the course, but kind of ask people around you if they can help you. So, can another mum at school pick up your child 1 day a week and you could return the favour? Or is there an after school club? Is there childcare funding or grants in your local college? Are there family members or friends that will, help you, to encourage you, to support you emotionally? So, ask for help, see who can help you, but literally take each bridge as you come to it, and you'll be surprised at how many barriers that you can come across if you have that goal in mind and if you have that enthusiasm and determination. And I think another bit of good advice is always ask if you don't get something. Never think, I can't ask if I don't get something. If you're not understanding something, maybe the teacher isn't explaining it properly, or maybe the rest of the class feel the same way too. So never feel that everyone else knows more than me. That's not the case at all. We're all in education to learn, and that's what it's all about. And we have different learning journeys, but so everyone's learning journey starts somewhere. So if you're thinking of doing, a degree and you need to do an access course, find out today, what your local college offers. Ask if you can speak to a teacher and take that first step.
That's great advice. And I really agree with that idea of just fall in love with the learning as well. Read good books, watch great films, just enjoy it more than anything.
Absolutely, definitely. And I think I am obviously biased, but I think sociology is the best subject you could ever study.
Of course it is. Of course it is. We all know that, Sarah. Sarah, thank you very much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. Absolutely love the show, and I'll be looking forward to sharing the podcast with my students again. But this time they'll hear a familiar voice on the podcast.
Yeah. That's great. If you can keep on promoting it, sending out to your students, that would be fantastic.
I certainly will. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
The Sociology Show podcast relies on the kind contributions of sponsorship and donations. If you enjoy the show, then you can help with the hosting costs by donating as little as £5 on the GoFundMe page. Simply visit uk.gofundme.com and search for the Sociology Show. If you can donate, then you will be sent a Sociology Show pen as a small thank you for your continued support of the show.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. If you would like to contact the show or be interviewed, then please email the sociologyshowpodcast@gmail.com.